We are not alone. You are watching Contact TV with your hosts, Lesley Mitchell-Clarke
and Wes Roberts,
exploring ufology, metaphysics, and beyond with the world's foremost experts. Hello, everyone. I'm Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. I am one of the hosts of Contact TV and also the director of the Contact and Disclosure Symposium, which is an annual event here in Toronto. And it is my great pleasure to introduce this particular episode. Last spring, when we had our debut symposium, we were counting on bringing in Mr. Daniel Sheehan, who I will tell you a bit about in just a moment. And unfortunately, due to some technical problems, we were not able to continue that part of our program. However, that being said, today we are welcoming Daniel Sheehan, which is, of course, a tremendous honor. He is probably the world's foremost exo-politician at the moment. He's an attorney, well-known attorney. He helped bring Nixon and his crew to justice. He's been involved in deep levels of government, in defense. He's a best-selling author, and currently he is the director, one of the directors of the Paradigm Institute. And we are really, really thrilled to be able to welcome him. And this interview is going to be conducted by our excellent colleague and also Contact TV correspondent, Mr. Victor Viggiani, who in his own right is also an exopolitician. He's been involved in this type of subject matter for 45 years. He is a media consultant, a publicist, a journalist, a longtime educator, and deeply involved in every cutting-edge issue that is presenting itself in the areas of ufology. So I am happy that we can present this to you. And again, as I said, extremely honored that Daniel Sheehan is joining us today. And I think you are going to find this interview not only insightful, but mind-opening. And of course, as we always say, remember, we are not alone.
Good afternoon, Daniel Sheehan. Victor Viggiani here from Toronto, Canada, and welcome to you.
Terrific. Great. Thanks, Victor. It's good to see you.
It's really great for you to be here. We've got a bunch of people on Contact TV who are going to be seeing this, and Lesley Mitchell and her studio friends here tell me that there are well over 2,000 people that are just itching to see this. What I want to do is try to get a sense of a bit of a bird's eye view on this whole issue, and I've heard you talk about it so many times. It's just that so many things stick in my craw about this thing, as it does yours. And I want to start with one thing, that just a comment on your part as to why this whole issue has somehow avoided being captured on the mainstream media like any other issue that's going on today. Doesn't matter whether it's the U.S. Senate doing something, whether it's Mike Johnson saying something untoward on camera at a press conference, or the age of Donald Trump and the age of the president. These things all make the front page news or the first item on any newscast. What's, in your estimation, what's stopping this issue from cracking through that glass ceiling?
I think, Victor, that the opprobrium that has attached to this particular subject, down through the decades, where there's been a concentrated campaign, a conscious campaign mounted by the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States and the certain elements inside the military that are joined with our intelligence agencies, that they have mounted domestically, completely contrary to the law, a propaganda campaign to poison everybody's minds against the issue of UFOs for 45 years, telling people that it was totally untrue. They've had one report after another saying that it's not true. The Condon report, the Blue Book, etc. but that Richard Dolan, in his major work, his 2-volume work called UFOs in the National Security State, has documented, showing the previously classified documents, showing the campaign that they mounted. And what they've done is they have placed inside, we have the records of 42 different full-time intelligence agents that have been placed inside the major mainstream news media, that inside ABC, CBS, and NBC, and now, CNN and MSNBC, they and all the newspapers, Washington Post, New York Times, etc. They have placed a national security reporter, is what it's called. And what they do is they sit there in the office, and they're waiting for any stories that come up that are of national security interest. And what they do is they tell the editors what to do about that national security issue, how to cover it, whether or not to cover it, etc. And when anything comes up that they do want to cover that has to do with national security, they go directly to that reporter. And that reporter either writes the story for the print media, or they're the ones that go on television and report the national security issue. And it's under the control of the national security state bureaucracy here in the United States. And that national security state bureaucracy is still locked into the position that UFOs are not real, that they're mirages of some sort. They're even behind the power curve on what the recent memo is inside the Defense Department, official memo, saying that they're acknowledging that UFOs are real, that they're vehicles of some sort, that they're not just swamp gas, that they're not just a mistaken flock of birds all the time. They're not just searchlights on clouds that are being mistaken for UFOs. They haven't gotten the memo. And so what they've done is they've poisoned the well so intensely with regard to the mainstream media outlets, the 3 major networks here in the United States and the major cable stations, that anybody who attempts to treat the UFO issue seriously is viewed as irrational, kooky, fringe conspiracy theorists, and they've spent 70 years basically pouring that message into the ear of the major media people, that they haven't been able to overcome that momentum. And that's really what's going on here. And there still is an active effort on the part of an element inside the intelligence community here in the United States to keep that pressure on, to not have them cover this thing in a serious way, so that they can just say it's only fringe media people who are treating it seriously, like
Right.
News Nation.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's what's really going on here. So there's, to some degree, still an active campaign going on the part of the people that have already been publicly revealed by Richard Dolan, but they're still at it, and so therefore the major news media people will not treat this seriously, even though the normal indicia of a serious story, such as the fact that the United States Congress has held public hearings in which David Grush has testified last July 26th, that all of his information is, as a member of the UFO task force in the Pentagon, is that the United States is in possession of one or more extraterrestrial, non-human origin spacecraft, and biological evidence proving that the occupants are non-human. He has said that, which means that the Congressional Oversight Committee, the House Oversight Committee in the House of Representatives, has green-lighted that testimony, because they knew that was the testimony he was going to provide, because they cleared it for him to say, which means they've endorsed that. And very importantly, the United States Defense Department Office of Pre-Publication Review and Security that whole office has green-lighted Grush to tell what he said. Okay, so there's that whole dynamic is going on inside the Defense Department, but there are people who have either refused to read the memo, are still stuck on the old position inside the Pentagon and inside the intelligence agencies, and the mainstream media know that they'd better toe that mark, or else they'll be cut off from any national security information, and all their sources will dry up. And they know that that is still operational against them, so they're not going to treat this until they absolutely have to.
So I guess you probably saw the video of Chuck Schumer standing at the dais in the U.S. Senate when he announced the National Disclosure Act and what he and Mike Rounds were doing. So that to me, it would be front page news if someone got a hold of it. But it never appeared anywhere else but on YouTube. And this is Chuck Schumer saying very, very specifically and talking about an act where the word UAP and extraterrestrial or whatever it is occurs multiple times in that bill. And if that kind of information is not allowed to get out, it sort of makes a mockery of this thing called mainstream news being sort of the tail wagging the dog.
Well, one of the steps that they've taken, of course, is they're calling it UAP stuff all the time now. And people don't have the slightest idea what that means.
Right.
The vast bulk of people in the country. The United States Defense Department intentionally adopted the UAP designation originally as unidentified aerial phenomenon instead of referring to it as UFOs, citing their assertion that, well, the UFO tag carries such stigma because they, in fact, engaged for 70 years in pouring that stigma onto it, and so now they've said theoretically the reason that they've abandoned the term UFO is because they don't want to carry that stigma. But what they've done is they have now adopted the UAP designation, which they originally started out with as unidentified aerial phenomena. And now they've changed it to unidentified anomalous phenomena, which people have no idea whatsoever what that means. Does that mean ghosts and leprechauns and fairies and, Bigfoot and, other things like that? So what they're trying to do is they're trying to continue the besmirching, the UFO issue, which is, we all know what we're talking about then. With this entire panoply of other kind of anomalous phenomena, ball lightning and other kind of weird things. And so that there is still an intentional campaign going on inside an element of the United States intelligence agencies and inside the Defense Department to quell this story. Okay, so that's why this thing is still not being reported by the mainstream, either print media or electronic media.
Yeah. So I guess what you're saying is that whoever's in charge of this nomenclature, they've really changed the lexicon so that the general public won't recognize what they're talking about or what anybody else would be talking about with respect to UFOs. Okay, that whole idea fascinates me because I've heard you talk about the national security state a number of times as to how it's out of control. And I don't think many of our listeners really realize, especially with respect to the United States of America right now, that you have stated that the national security state is, in fact, out of control. How do you see that?
Well, it's perfectly clear that when the National Security Act of 1947 was passed, immediately after the end of World War II, that there was an alliance that was established by the Central Intelligence Agency that was created by the National Security Act with extreme right-wing forces. In fact, heavily recruited people from the Third Reich. And people say, oh, if you say something like that, that's got to be a conspiracy theory. This just isn't true. Well, the fact is, it's overwhelmingly established that that's been true. That they brought in they've admitted the kind of rocket scientists and say, oh, well, okay, we just wanted to bring in their rocket scientists so we could get to the moon. you know. But the fact is that that was called Operation Paperclip, that particular operation. But the fact is there was a second operation. It was called Operation Overcast. And Operation Overcast, pursuant to that program, the United States Central Intelligence Agency and National Security Apparatus imported tons of, dozens and dozens of, actually hundreds of, as it turns out, political propagandists for the fascist regime of the Third Reich. They brought in Reinhard Gehlen, for example, who was the head of the Third Reich's anti-Soviet and anti-Eastern Bloc intelligence to run the entire West German intelligence services. And that West German intelligence services served for 26 years as the principal source of information about the Soviet Union and about the so-called communist conspiracy, which we saw McCarthy and the people flog, for 10 years here in the United States. And so there's a hardcore right-wing pro-national security state element that has been historically inside the intelligence community in the United States that has been dedicated to keeping this secret, that UFOs are real and that they're being piloted and occupied by members of one or more extraterrestrial non-human species from different star systems. And that is the big secret. And they don't want that revealed because, as we talked about before, Victor, the national security state and its allies inside the Defense Department want to capture the technology of the UFOs so that they can use that technology to develop an entire new generation of weapon systems, specifically platforms on which they can deliver nuclear weapons, nuclear bombs, into Russia or China. That's what they're up to right now. And that's why they're wanting to keep this secret, completely secret still. And the inertia of that whole program has caused people inside the Defense Department and inside the intelligence agencies to continue not only to lie about it publicly, such as we've seen with Sean Kirkpatrick in the issuance of the reports from the AARO office, the All-Domain Anomalous Resolution Office, but we also see the people inside the Pentagon Public Relations Office actually issuing knowingly false statements, denying the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program ever existed in the Pentagon, that there's never been any kind of an investigation recently by the Defense Department or the Pentagon about UFOs. Flat out, bald-faced lies, which they're still doing. And it raises this profound issue, and that is that the national security state people believe that they are somehow authorized to lie, not only to the American people and to mount full-scale propaganda campaigns on behalf of lies, but also to lie to Congress. I mean, even more profoundly unconstitutional. I mean, they actually come in and perjure themselves under oath in testimony to Congress, telling them that there's no such investigative program. UFOs are not real. There's no such thing as any extraterrestrial civilization coming and visiting us. And they're keeping that entire secret still secret. That's what's going on.
It's sort of our good friend Steve Bassett has made it public. He said it a couple of times that constitutionally governments have always been allowed to keep secrets, but they've never been given the right to lie to their people. That's where we stand right now.
That's right. That is exactly what's happening.
Yeah. For a moment, let's delve into this whole idea of the technology and how the demands on the aerospace industry have been put by this legislation coming up. First of all, has that been passed? And the demands on the aerospace industry to reveal what their data about UFOs or UAP or technology that they have, like, where is that going? Where does it stand with the demands that have been put on that industry to fess up and to say, and then the pushback by people like Mike Rogers and other people? Where does that stand right now?
Well, where that stands is that the United States Senate last July, passed a law out of the Senate. And now with the bicameral legislature here in our country, as yours, that both houses of our Congress have to approve a bill in order for it to become law. And the United States Senate passed a bill unanimously inside its Intelligence Committee, 17-0. Then they passed virtually unanimously, 89-11. Out of the United States Senate, a bill which mandated that all of the private aerospace corporations gather together every single piece of information they've ever acquired in their relationship with the United States government pertaining to UFOs and to any extraterrestrial intelligence, and to turn that over to the United States government in the National Archives. Okay. Now that is the same bill, of course, that mandated that all 6 of our United States defense military agencies, all 18 of our intelligence agencies, and all 32 of our United States Defense Department agencies, all of those agencies had to also gather together everything that they have ever come to know since January 1st of 1945 about the UFO phenomenon and about the issue of extraterrestrial intelligence. And they too had to gather that all together within 300 days of the passage of that bill, which would have made it basically October 18th to October 20th, depending on how you compute that. But let's call it, I've been referring people to October 18th, but let's refer to it as October 20th, because that's the official date that has been adopted now by the Congress. That by that time, under the Senate bill, all the military and intelligence agencies of the U.S. government, plus the private aerospace industry, had to gather all of that information together by October 20th and turn it over to the United States government, to the National Security Archives immediately. Okay, that was the bill that was passed by the Senate, and they're getting ready again to pass that bill again in the immediate future. I'll get right back to that in a minute. What happened is last year that Senate bill was sent over to the House side here in the United States, to the House of Representatives, and what happened is the arch conservative, reactionary Republican head of the House Intelligence Committee and the reactionary Republican chair of the House Armed Services Committee joined together, both of whom received their major contributions from the private aerospace corporations. Those two men, Michael Turner, the head of the Intelligence Committee in the House, and Michael Rogers, the head of the Armed Services Committee in the House, receive massive funding every 2 years from the private aerospace corporations that want to keep this secret. And what they did is they struck out of the Senate bill any mandate that the private aerospace corporations have to turn over anything, okay, or gather it together. They removed that mandate from the Senate.
Gather
from the
together
Senate.
and submit.
Period. They struck that out. Okay, and so that, but they left in place, very importantly, they left in place the mandate that was in the Senate bill. On the House side, they left it in place that all 6 of our military services, all 18 of our our intelligence agencies, and all 32 of our United States Defense Department agencies, they did have to gather together every single piece of information that they have about UFOs and every single piece of information they have about extraterrestrial intelligence. And they have to gather it all together, and they have to gather it all together and put it into a digital format with a searchable index. And it has to be completed by October 20th. They said 300 days from the passage of the bill. Okay. And that bill was passed. Okay. But they changed the language from saying that they had to turn it over immediately on October 20th what they said is they had to turn it over thereafter as soon as possible.
Oh,
Okay. Now, we lawyers, when we saw that, our hair caught on fire, and we said, "No, wait a second here now. If you use a wiggle phrase like that as soon as possible, they're going to think of every conceivable reason. Their horse died, recently, or their dog ate the homework, or they can't find the records, or please give us more time. They're going to come up with something, and so that was a problem, but." As I say, and they excluded entirely the requirement that the private aerospace corporations who had gotten any information or any materials or any technologies from the government pertaining to the UFOs, they took that out on the House side. So the law that got passed, and which is presently operational here in the country, is that all of those military services of the United States and all those intelligence agencies and all those Defense Department agencies are in fact under a present mandatory order here in the United States to gather together every single phone message, every single memo, every single report, every single piece of information that they have and have ever had since January 1st of 1945, gather it all together, put it into a digital format with a searchable index, and have it fully prepared by October 20th of this year. Okay, and so that's the date that we're looking at, and then they are under the mandate to turn that over as soon as possible. Now, one additional difference between the previous Senate bill that was passed and the House bill that was ultimately passed was that the Senate bill, they set up a panel, an independent panel that was going to all of that information once it was turned over, and that panel was going to decide that all of the information that was more than 25 years old was going to be released immediately to the public. Now, that was extraordinary because that deals with Roswell, it deals with Aztec, it deals with MJ-12, it deals with all of those things that happened before the year 2000, basically, right? And that panel was going to be the one to release all of that, and they were going to review all of the information that has been obtained since the year 2000. And they were going to, that independent panel was going to make a decision as to how much of that is going to be released. And only the president of the United States himself would have been authorized to postpone the immediate public release of any of that information, 25 years old or more recent. Okay, the president himself was the only one that could postpone that. All right, from that panel. Mm-hmm. Now, that has been changed as well by the House of Representatives. What they did is they refused to allow that panel to be created, and they refused to allow any such panel to independently review the information once it was all gathered together. What they did is just outrageously, they left the heads of all the military services, the heads of all 18 of the intelligence agencies, and the heads of all 32 of the United States Defense Department agencies themselves, the very people who've been hiding it and the very people who've been lying about it for 70 years, they left them in charge of deciding how much should be made public and how much had to be either postponed or retained as secret forever. Okay, now that's a disaster. Because we know, lawyers will know, what they're going to do is they're going to designate virtually everything as having to be kept secret, and so that's what we're getting ready to see happen here. Even though they're mandated to gather it all together, which is something, and put it into digital format, which is important, and be searchable, so that other people who aren't intimately familiar with it can find what they're looking for in there. Okay. So that still is the law, and it's been signed into law by President Biden. Okay, so that is what's happening right now. It's just that we expect a 99.9% of all the information to be deemed by the heads of the military and intelligence agencies to have to remain secret. So that's what's going to happen on October 20th of this year.
Right. So you've
So importantly,
go ahead.
what the Senate is doing right now, which you referred to, when that happened, when that kind of gutting of the bill that was passed by the Senate happened, what happened is the chief sponsors of that bill on the Senate side, Senator Chuck Schumer, who's the majority leader of the Senate, and Mike Brown's, very conservative Republican from South Dakota, got up on the floor of the Senate and basically said they're not going to stand for that. The United States Senate has already made clear what they think ought to happen here. And so they're definitely committed to coming back and re-insisting upon their bill, which they're in the process of doing right now. And that they're making it even stronger. And they're making the language even clearer. And they have prepared the language now. A significant portion of it is all completed. There's some more additions that are going to be included in the bill, which are still in the hands of the drafters. Our New Paradigm Institute is in direct communication with them. We know what that process is all about. So that's going on right now. In some time between now and approximately the same time that they released their Senate bill to the public last year, approximately around July 26th or so, or 27th, the Senate is going to reveal what the new bill is that they're coming back with, to say they're not going to take this laying down. Okay, that they're going to come back and pass a bill which mandates the immediate release of the first anything earlier than 25 years old. Okay, and they're going to do that, and they're going to insist again that the independent panel be created to independently review the information and be the one to make the decisions about what's going to be released in addition to that. So that's what's going on right now. And over on the House side, there are a number of individual members of Congress that are putting in individual bills. For example, Robert Garcia, who is the United States Congressman from Los Angeles, one of them, had put in a bill to reestablish the independent panel, just that piece of the Senate bill. He put it into the House. Tim Burchett, the Republican congressman from down in Tennessee, has put in a bill specifically insisting that the president just command the military and intelligence agencies to release everything they've got right away. And so there are little individual bills that have been proposed by individual members of the House of Representatives as distinct from a comprehensive bill that is being prepared over on the Senate side. But the Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker of the House, Michael Johnson, has in fact refused to allow any of those to come to the floor for a vote.
Which I think brings me to the point of, I guess, a sense of frustration that you must feel. And I know you've got all the cadre of lawyers at the New Paradigm Institute working on this and doing all of the things to bring this stuff to the surface. And I know you're working really hard at it. And I sense it sometimes when I watch some of the interviews that you've done, that you're becoming really passionate about this stuff, a little bit more so that I'm accustomed to from you. And is it true that you were told to be more discreet about trying to get at this stuff?
Well, no, I wasn't. I wasn't advised to be more discreet about trying to get at this stuff. What it was that I was being asked not to give so much detail about who it was that was working on what bills. and what the present state of the language was, and what was the state of the debate going on.
I see.
Yes,
Okay.
for example,
Okay.
over on the Senate side, about how they should, for example, respond to the issue on with regard to eminent domain. Because I've always been very candid with people as a people's advocate, keeping people abreast. And I was being told by people that it was more information than people really wanted or needed. It was kind of obfuscating the kind of basic pieces of it. But on the other hand, the people that were engaged in the negotiations were concerned because they thought that if I was revealing it to the public, it was going to be revealed to the opponents, and that they might try to intervene
I see.
in it.
See. Okay.
That's all that was. No,
Okay. Good.
no one has suggested that I be less zealous in
Good.
trying
Good.
to figure out what's going on and getting the right thing done.
I'm glad about that for sure. Speak to us about the number of whistleblowers that are slated to come forward and the kinds of protection that many people are seeking to give these people.
Well, as of right now, there are 40 people who have come forward and have testified under oath in depositions to the United States Senate Intelligence Committee. So they have that information. They know what the information is. And they are reviewing right now the question of whether to present one or more of those witnesses in conjunction with the public release of the information in the bill, the new Senate bill, what we call, Schumer rounds 2.0, the comeback of the same but only stronger bill that they passed last year. So the bottom line is that process is underway right now, and that is going to happen. And so they've got a cadre of some 40 witnesses that they can choose from. We at the New Paradigm Institute, as you pointed out, we have this cadre of lawyers that are in communication with additional potential whistleblowers that want us to legally represent them in going through the process of getting them introduced to the Senate Intelligence Committee people, getting them interviewed, and protecting them. Now, but some of them are still very concerned about being publicly revealed who they are. And so they don't believe that the present regime of protections for government whistleblowers protect them, because even the general rules that protect whistleblowers, there are some statutes that have been passed by Congress to protect people who are government employees who come to know about things that are illegal or fraud and abuse, that they are protected in coming forward. But the problem is that people who are in the national security state, who have national security clearances, are excluded from those protections for other general whistleblowers. Okay, and so what we've been asked to do, and we've done now, the New Paradigm Institute, our lawyers, we have prepared an enhanced UFO whistleblower protection act, which is full-throated, full-blown protection for the whistleblowers. And rather than have to carry all the baggage of trying to have this made available to every single whistleblower anywhere in the United States government, we've crafted a bill which is specially designed to protect just UFO whistleblowers. Okay, and we've muscled that up to the point where we've provided a private legal cause of action against anybody inside the government or any employees of any government contractor who take any steps whatsoever to threaten or try to intimidate or to punish in any way any UFO whistleblower, that there'll be a private legal cause of action brought against them in a federal district court against them. And secondly, we have stripped those government employees of any immunity. That generally any employee of the United States government who has been engaged in activity in their capacity as a government employee enjoys a certain presumed immunity, sovereign immunity against lawsuit. Okay, for anything that's been undertaken in their official capacity, right? And the only way that you can sue them is under a thing called the Federal Tort Claims Act, which is a very limited or a limited waiver of that general sovereign immunity. But what we have done in the New Paradigm Institute, UFO Whistleblower Protection Act of 2024, we have stripped them of that privilege, any type of immunity. Okay, that we're arguing that to the extent to which they've been participating in these UFO programs that have not been lawfully reported to the Congress and have not had lawful and constitutionally required oversight exercised over them, that anybody who's participated in such a program is not, in fact, functioning in their official government capacity. And so, therefore, they're stripped of any such qualified immunity against lawsuit. Now, that's extraordinarily strong language, okay? And thirdly, we have not only included as potential defendants in such private lawsuits against them by any whistleblower who has been threatened or any actions taken against them of reprisals against them reporting UFO information to Congress, that any person who engages in that activity will be civilly liable, but anybody who conspires with them to allow that kind of a thing to take place, any kind of punishment or retribution, they too are subject to lawsuit. They are going to be joined as defendants under the conspiracy theory. And thirdly, this is quite extraordinary. We've even now made defendants anybody in the government or the employee of a government contractor who comes to know about the existence of such a conspiracy to threaten or to intimidate any UFO whistleblower. And that person who comes to know about it does not take whatever steps they can legally take to prevent that from happening, are also co-defendants. And so that this is a mandatory requirement that everybody in the government take active measures to protect UFO whistleblowers. And they have the obligation to do so. And if they don't, then they're subject to private lawsuit by the whistleblower. And our New Paradigm Institute, with our lawyers, stand ready to legally represent them in pouring it to any such people who threaten them or conspire to threaten them.
That sounds
Okay,
extraordinarily comprehensive.
Yes, it is. It is.
Let's move. Yeah, let's move in an entirely different direction. And pardon me if this sounds like it's coming out of left field, but I need to ask you to tell the story about Albert Stein.
Yeah, Albert. Let me tell you, Albert Stein was a United States Army enlisted man who was a clerk typist in the United States Army. You know, during and after World War II, he was assigned to Project Blue Book, which was the originally secret but eventually public investigation that the United States Air Force conducted into the issue of UFOs, in the purported extraterrestrial origin of these UFOs and the purported extraterrestrial pilots of these UFOs. And as we know, most people know now, that the report that was ultimately issued by Project Blue Book, you know, just came up with completely asinine explanations for trying to explain away 99% of every report that they purported to investigate. But it turns out that unbeknownst to the outside world, there were over 700 cases of UFO sightings that, even with the preposterous lengths to which they went in Project Blue Book to try to explain away the UFO sighting, that there were over 700 cases of UFO sightings that couldn't be explained away under any rational or conceivably rational explanation. Now, these were all assigned to a special unit of the United States Air Force. And this fellow, Albert Stein, was assigned out of the U.S. Army in his official capacity to be the clerk typist, at that top secret section of Project Blue Book. And what he did is, it was his job to sit in the office, and when they sent out investigators to interview people who had been witnesses to one of these 700 inexplicable sightings of UFOs, they would come back and give them their reports, and he would type them all up and keep all the official records. And so, even though investigators kind of came and went in and out of that particular unit, and were assigned for a period of time, a year or sometimes 2 years, he stayed there year after year after year after year. And so he became very close with the commander of that particular section, that particular unit. And so there came a point in time, far into his service, that Albert Stein was invited by the commander of the top secret unit in Project Blue Book to accompany him to go to Area 51. And so he went. And not only did they go to Area 51, but they went to S4. And they actually went down in the elevator, down many stories below ground at S4. And he personally witnessed several UFOs that had been captured or crashed and recovered. He saw them there. And very importantly, he was taken to the site at S4 underground, where there was a live extraterrestrial being. And his commander went in to communicate with the extraterrestrial being. Now, Albert Stein himself was a fundamentalist Christian, and he thought the ET was demonic, and he didn't want to go near it. And so he stayed outside, but he could see through this two-way mirror that was one of the walls of the room in which his commander was actually telepathically communicating with the extraterrestrial being. But Albert stayed outside. And what he did is he was shown these index cards. They had these boxes of index cards that had the information that was put down on the cards. He didn't tell me whether they were typed or hand printed, but he told me about them, that set forth the information that had been obtained from telepathic interviews of the extraterrestrial being that was there, that they referred to as EB, an extraterrestrial biological entity. And it said in those cards, he told me this, that on one of the cards, it showed the question was posed to the extraterrestrial being, the EB, so where do you come from? Where are you from? And he said, I'm part of a grouping of individuals from different star systems inside our galaxy that have all been brought together. And our job is to go around inside the galaxy to explore different planets where life has evolved, to track to see what state of development it has reached, if it's reached intelligent levels, to monitor those cultures, to see what they're doing, and to report back on how life is developing on these different planets. And then the question was put to him, well, who's in charge of this? Who's the one that's brought you all together to have you do this? And he said, well, you people, this is what EB is reported to have said is that you people would refer to it as God, but it's very different from what you think. Okay. And he was so offended by that. This guy is this fundamentalist Christian. He was so offended by that he refused ever to tell anybody about it, and refused to tell anybody about his experience until he was dying. And then he called me. He called me and asked me to come and see him. And I flew to see him in Minnesota. Went to Minnesota and drove all the way up into the little town where he was, and went to see him in hospice where he was dying. Actually, he had all the tubes in him and in his nose and little things in his arms and little, fluids being pumped into him. And it was there that I interviewed him, and this is where he related all of this information to me. So he is, I found that, and I've, as you might guess, have interviewed and taken depositions and stuff from hundreds of people down through the years, as a trial lawyer. And I found him to be entirely credible. I didn't see him having any, great advantages before he was dying, to tell someone about this. So he wasn't going to lie. He wasn't going to lie under those circumstances, in my opinion. And I questioned him and put a number of questions to him, and he was very clear about what his answers were. And that was Albert Stein.
The reason that I brought it up was because when I heard you tell that story before, and the idea behind why this extraterrestrial being was sent as a part of a group to monitor other planets, I've always had the impression through abductees too, the experiencers, that whoever is doing this is not just one race, or it's a multiplicity of races, and that they have in fact been to other planets to do what they're doing here or similar things. Okay, so I guess the question would be, A, what kind of federated group is this? And B, I've heard you mention the mantis beings as being a group of beings that seem to be somehow deferred to by all other of these races. How does that play out? How important is that?
Well, I think that that's very important. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the mantis people are themselves the initiators of these ideas. They may be just the ranking officers, that whatever the extraterrestrial intelligence is that directs these people, that as Albert Stein said, that you people would refer to it as what you think about as God, but it's very different than you think. So whatever that is would seem to be, at least according to Albert, what is the sort of authority that is functioning here, and that this particular unit, with beings in it from different star systems, seems to be being coordinated by whatever that source of authority is. Now, in that group, and he said that they're from different star systems. So I would assume that the 5 major species that we are most familiar with, may all be subject to whatever that other authority was. But what in a number of different people that I've interviewed down through the years, and as you know, I've interviewed people originally in the context of being special counsel for the President Carter requested investigation of the UFO phenomenon, dating back to 1977. Then also as the legal counsel for Dr. John Mack in 1994 and 95, interviewing people to be witnesses at his trial before the faculty committee at Harvard University. I've interviewed a number of experiencers as general counsel for the peer group, the Project for Extraordinary Experience Research under Dr. John Mack in Cambridge. Later on, I was in charge of vetting the witnesses that were going to be appearing at Dr. Stephen Greer's disclosure event Disclosure Project event in May of 2001 at the National Press Club. And I've interviewed people to vet the people that were later going to be testifying at the citizens' hearings in 2013 that Steve Bassett helped organize. And I've interviewed people since that as legal counsel for Lou Elizondo. And so that I've interviewed a number of these people, and a number of these people have talked about being either in the presence of or interviewing people whom they completely credited, who have been abducted and have found themselves in a situation where they've seen more than one species present when in the setting in which they've been transported or taken when they were abducted. And they have stated that when they've seen these very, very tall mantis people who are like 7 feet tall, they're very big and tall and extraordinarily skinny, kind of stooped over, like that they give people the impression of a praying mantis. That's how they've gotten this designation as the mantis people. That whenever they've seen them, along with anybody like little short grays or the tall grays or even the reptilians, they seem to get the sense that the mantis people that are there seem to be in charge, seem to be giving directions to the other beings, or the other beings are submitting to them in doing what they seem to be told to do. And that's happened on a number of different occasions. Okay. And so that now that, and very specifically and importantly, any number of these people have asserted that they saw these mantis people in the presence of United States military personnel when they were abducted. That they found themselves in a setting where there were the mantis people and there were U.S. military personnel that and human beings, Americans usually, that were interviewing them or asking them questions or giving them tests, specifically tests to test their psychic abilities, the abductees. As to what type of psychic capabilities they had, what kind of precognition, what kind of remote viewing capacities that they had. Those were the particular kind of tests that seemed to correlate with human beings being there and these mantis beings. That is what seemed to be going on in those reports from the interviews that I've had with those people.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to the point, weaving through all of this, back to the point of these beings doing what they're doing throughout the galaxy or even beyond, with the admission that some of these species, if not all of them, are billions of years in advance of us, billions of years. And is there a sense, and I think you've mentioned this at some point, that beyond all of the contact that we've experienced through the abductees or experiencers, is there a sense that all of this geopolitical nonsense that's going on right now, okay, and I'm going somewhere with this, okay, that if that in fact is the case, okay, that these beings are doing that, is there a chance for us as a society, as a civilization, to somehow reach out to these beings and say, okay, let's put all this politics aside here and let's communicate directly so that we can, find out who you are, where you're from, and what you want, without even talking to the government at all, because you believe, as I do too, this information belongs to us, not the government. So is there a diplomatic corridor through which we can go to speak directly to these beings and sidestep all the stuff that's going on right now geopolitically within the national security state?
Well, that harkens back, Victor, to your previous question about what information we might have about whatever juridical alliance or anything they have with each other. And is there some sort of centralized authority of some sort, pursuant to which these different species that appear to come from different star systems or different planets, at least, whether there's some sort of unified juridical entity of any sort that governs them, because that would be what would determine what their protocols are as to whether or not they're going to be reaching out to make themselves available for direct diplomatic access. Now, that question divides itself into two parts. Number one, would they restrict themselves to having any kind of diplomatic dialogues only with other entities, government entities here on our planet? Or secondly, might they be open to direct approach through citizen diplomacy? Our own experience on our planet is that both things go on at the same time. While the United States has, for example, direct diplomatic relations with the Russian government and the Chinese government and the government of India and France and England, et cetera, it's clear that our citizens have direct communication going on with the citizens of those other nation states. But very importantly, we actually have citizen activities going on with some of their foreign diplomats, actually, in Russia, in China, in India, in France, and other places. That we're, for example, we're at the New Paradigm Institute, we're in contact with, I think, 6 different countries' state legislatures, their legislatures, to try to assist them in getting legislation passed, similar to the legislation that we're in the process of getting passed here, about mandating that their military services and intelligence services come forward and provide, at least to their legislative bodies, the information that they have about the UFO phenomenon and about this extraterrestrial civilization. And so that there are those different levels of diplomatic communication that our Washington office director, Dr. James Garrison, when he was my number 2 at Jesuit headquarters, when I was general counsel there in their social ministry office, that we structured and organized and coordinated together him reaching out directly to government officials in the Soviet Union, way back in as early as 1980. And he ended up, having indirect contact directly with Brezhnev in the Soviet Union, and was then in the process of reaching out to have contact with Andropov. But Shevardnadze recommended that Dr. Garrison meet instead with Gorbachev at that time, even though at that time he was only Secretary of Agriculture. And we carried on, I say we, Dr. Garrison, and he and I had these conversations about him going to Russia to do this, right? And he had direct face-to-face conversations and discussions with Gorbachev when Gorbachev was still Secretary of Agriculture. And it was there that they entered into this agreement that Jim Garrison, Dr. Garrison, would become the president of the Gorbachev Foundation, and that we would all work together in a coordinated way to try to get the Soviet Union to agree to disassemble the nuclear warheads of their arsenal, and that we in the United States would have to reciprocate, and that we could start building down the nuclear arsenals to the point of eliminating them. Okay, so we had engaged in that process with Gorbachev, and so that we have had those kind of relations. We have experience with those kind of relations. Myself from Jesuit headquarters, that we've been are regularly in contact with people that are government officials, even presidents of other countries, and so we have experience in this, and so that we're open to doing that. I'm a very firm advocate of individual citizens reaching out to the people who are in these craft. And I say people, I believe that since these beings from the different star systems are obviously all highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, They're highly sentient beings like us. I refer to them as people, even though they're a different species from Homo sapien, they're people. In the same way that Cro-Magnon man was of a different phylum from us, but they're human beings, and I believe that these beings are entitled to legal recognition as people, so that if one were to kill one of these beings, I would think that is an act of murder. Okay, now we're in fact engaged in those discussions at the present moment, because we're reviewing with my legal interns the potential applicability of the Federal Criminal Racketeering Act to evaluate potential unlawful conduct that may have been engaged in by people who are part of the legacy group that have been suppressing this information and potentially either shooting down or forcibly bringing down these craft and potentially killing any of the occupants. That would qualify as murder, which is one of the predicate acts of the Federal Criminal Racketeering Act. That's sort of a sidebar. But the bottom line is, I believe that we as human beings have to do everything in our power, every single one of us, to try to reach out and contact the beings that are coming here in these craft, to try to have direct communications with them. And if anybody were to try to stop us from doing that and to threaten to prosecute you for unlawful attempt to establish diplomatic relations of any kind with a foreign power, we'll defend you. I'll defend you personally. We've got a cadre of a dozen lawyers, but I would defend you against that, because we have the right and the obligation to protect our species, to reach out to the people. We obviously don't have the authority to enter into any kind of a binding treaty with them. That would have to be done through our government officials, but we can certainly reach out and establish relations with them in the same way that we had the citizen diplomacy program that was functioning with the Soviet Union, and Arm and Hammer, funded, and that was run out of the Esalen Institute here in California, and where we had cosmonauts and American astronauts sitting in the hot tubs together down at Esalen, that we've been engaged in this conduct, and people know that Dr. Greer and others, have sponsored these CE5 activities of going outdoors and reaching up and trying to communicate with the UFOs and trying to get them to land so that we can have direct communications with them. And we at the New Paradigm Institute are dedicated to training people to assist in that process. John Mack and I, were doing this, that we had actually begun training repeated contactees, repeated abductees, to try to train them into doing holotropic breathing so that they would be calm when this event started to happen. In the face of these beings, and we could actually communicate with the extraterrestrial beings through these contactees, to give them particular questions to ask, how to follow up on it. You would try to reach out and establish them being sort of diplomatic envoys, if you will.
Yeah. Before we bring this to any kind of closure, I know we've got a lot of Canadian people that will listen to this. It's one of the main reasons we're doing it. And we have one individual in the Canadian government. He's an MP from Manitoba. His name is Larry Maguire. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Larry.
I've heard about him.
Okay. And he has been pressing our government officials to recognize some of the overflights of our nuclear facilities, energy facilities of these UAP. And he's written to ministers of defense and to other members of parliament. And I've been engaging with his office to attempt to allow him to see a clearer way through to get this stuff on the floor of the House of Commons. And just yesterday, and begging your indulgence on this one, I actually mentioned to him, because I'm not thoroughly convinced that he can see a clear corridor as to how this thing should be brought up. And he spoke at the Soul Foundation symposium at Stanford University. I believe it was in March, and he made his point there. But I offered him the opportunity of speaking with you, because you did outreach with other countries, to find a way, if you could communicate with him or communicate to him more comprehensive ways that he can use to bring this forward within government. Because our government is, as part of the Five Eyes, et cetera, they're going to follow the national security state, the tail wagging the dog kind of thing. So I offered him that, and I hope, first of all, that, that you don't mind me doing that, and that if he does respond,
I trust you implicitly, Victor. That you're a trusted ally. So that you're authorized to do exactly that whenever you choose.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to get your okay on the record about that, because I kind of felt you would do it, but it's a matter of finding a way with some sort of clarity, which I don't think is there yet, and we'll just leave it at there. Anyways, Danny, okay, thank you so much for spending time with us. We really do appreciate you being with us on behalf of Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, the coordinator of Contact TV. We thank you very, very sincerely for your presence here today, and I hope we can spend some time talking again.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. Victor, for you, anything. You just give us a call, and we'll do this whenever you have the time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Danny, and you take care of yourself, okay?
Terrific. I appreciate it. Thank you, Victor.
We are not alone. You are watching Contact TV with your hosts, Lesley Mitchell-Clarke
and Wes Roberts,
exploring ufology, metaphysics, and beyond with the world's foremost experts.